The small colony of New Haven drifted silently in the vast emptiness of space, circling a distant planet that glowed faintly blue under the light of its sun. It was a place of peace and quiet, far away from the noise and chaos of Earth. The people who lived there had chosen this life because they wanted something different. They wanted to start fresh, to build a new world where everyone worked together. But even in this calm corner of the universe, trouble could find them. Rachel Dawson stood by the large window on the observation deck, staring out at the endless sea of stars. She was young, with dark hair tied back in a loose ponytail, and eyes that always seemed to be thinking about something important. Rachel spent most of her days fixing machines and keeping the colony running smoothly. She knew how vital her job was. Without her, the air people breathed or the water they drank might stop flowing. Still, sometimes she wished for more excitement in her life. The stars outside looked so mysterious, like they held secrets waiting to be discovered. On this particular evening, the stars didn't seem as peaceful as usual. Something felt wrong, though Rachel couldn't quite put her finger on it. Maybe it was the way the silence pressed against the glass, heavy and unnatural. Or maybe it was just her imagination playing tricks on her after too many hours working alone. Either way, she decided not to think about it too much. Instead, she turned and walked back toward the main hub of the colony. Inside, the lights were soft and warm, casting a golden glow over the walls. People moved around, chatting quietly or going about their tasks. Children laughed as they played near the hydroponic gardens, their voices echoing softly through the corridors. Everything appeared normal, but Rachel noticed a few faces looking more serious than usual. Over by the communication station, Daniel Brooks stood talking to another man. His brow was furrowed, and his hands gestured sharply as he spoke. Daniel was the leader of New Haven, and when he looked worried, everyone paid attention. Curious, Rachel approached him. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Daniel glanced at her before answering. "We've picked up some unusual readings near the edge of our system," he said. His voice was low but steady, meant only for those close enough to hear. "There's a fleet of ships heading this way." Rachel frowned. "A fleet? Are you sure?" He nodded. "Yes, and they're not responding to any of our hails. Whoever they are, they don't want to talk." That news sent a chill down Rachel's spine. New Haven wasn't prepared for visitors like this. Their defenses were minimal. A few outdated turrets and a single patrol ship that mostly stayed, docked for repairs. If these strangers meant harm, there wouldn't be much the colony could do to stop them. She turned to leave, intending to check on the life support systems one more time, but Daniel stopped her. "Rachel, we need your help. Make sure everything is ready in case things go badly." She swallowed hard but nodded. "I'll get right on it." As she hurried away, her mind raced. Who could these ships belong to? Pirates? Traders who had lost their way? Or something worse? The possibilities weighed heavily on her shoulders as she made her way to the engineering bay. Meanwhile, Emily Carter sat in the science lab, studying samples taken from the planet below. Emily was a biologist, and her work often kept her isolated from the rest of the colony. She preferred it that way. It gave her time to think and focus. But today her concentration was broken by the sound of hurried footsteps outside the door. "Emily," Rachel called as she entered the room. "Have you heard what's happening?" Emily looked up, surprised. "No, what?" Rachel quickly explained, about the approaching fleet and the lack of response to their communications. Emily's face paled slightly. "Do you think they're hostile?" "I don't know," Rachel admitted. "But Daniel seems worried, and that's enough for me to take it seriously." The two women exchanged a long look, both understanding the gravity of the situation. They weren't soldiers or strategists. They were just ordinary people trying to survive in an extraordinary place. Yet now, they found themselves facing a threat they hadn't anticipated. Back in the control room, Daniel continued to monitor the incoming ships. The screens displayed rows of data and images captured by the colony's sensors. The fleet was massive, consisting of dozens of vessels of varying sizes. Some were sleek and sharp-edged, while others were bulky and utilitarian. None of them matched any known designs used by Earth's fleets or friendly alien races. "This doesn't look good," muttered the man standing next to Daniel. His name was Joseph, and he handled navigation for the colony. "If they wanted to trade or negotiate, they'd have contacted us by now." Daniel agreed but didn't say anything aloud. He needed to stay calm for the sake of everyone else. Panic would only make things worse. Throughout the colony, word spread quickly about the approaching fleet. People gathered in common areas, whispering, nervously and speculating about what might happen. Parents ushered their children indoors while others began barricading doors and windows. It was clear that fear was taking hold and no one knew how to stop it. Rachel worked tirelessly in the engineering bay, double-checking every system and ensuring that backups were in place. If the power went out during an attack, the consequences could be catastrophic. As she moved from one console to the next, her thoughts kept drifting back to the stars outside. What did those ships want? Why had they come here? At the same time, Emily volunteered to assist with organizing the shelters. The colony had several underground bunkers designed to protect inhabitants during emergencies. While they weren't perfect, they offered some level of safety. Emily helped distribute supplies and guide people to the nearest shelter locations, all while trying to keep her own fears in check. Hours passed, each one feeling longer than the last. The tension in the air grew thicker with every passing minute. Finally, as night fell over the colony, the first signs of the fleet became visible. Tiny dots of light appeared on the horizon, growing brighter and larger as they drew closer. Through telescopes mounted on the outer hull, observers reported seeing strange symbols painted on the sides of the ships. Symbols no one recognized. Daniel called for another meeting, this time including all key members of the colony. Rachel, Emily, Joseph, and several others crowded into the small conference room. The mood was grim, almost suffocating. "We need to prepare for the worst," Daniel said, his tone firm but gentle. "These ships are armed and they're moving fast. We can't assume they'll leave us alone." "What are our options?" Rachel asked. Daniel hesitated before answering. "Not many. Our weapons won't stand a chance against them. All we can do is fortify our defenses, hide as many people as possible, and hope for reinforcements." "Reinforcements?" Emily echoed. "From where?" "Earth," Daniel replied. "They're monitoring our transmissions. If they detect distress signals, they'll send help." "But will it arrive in time?" Joseph asked. No one answered. The question hung in the air, unanswered and unsettling. As the meeting broke up, Rachel and Emily walked back to the engineering bay together. Neither spoke for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Eventually, Emily broke the silence. "What if they attack tonight?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rachel sighed. "Then we fight back as best we can, and we trust that Earth will come through for us." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. For now, they focused on doing their jobs and staying strong for the rest of the colony. Outside, the stars twinkled innocently, oblivious to the storm brewing beyond them. The colony of New Haven was quiet, almost eerily so. The usual hum of activity had been replaced by an oppressive silence as everyone braced for what might come next. Rachel Dawson stood in the engineering bay, her hands trembling slightly as she tightened bolts on a backup generator. She tried to focus on the task at hand, but her mind kept drifting to the fleet of ships creeping closer with each passing moment. Emily Carter entered the room, carrying a stack of emergency rations. Her face was pale, and her movements were quick, almost frantic. "We've moved all the supplies to the shelters," she said, placing the boxes on a nearby table. "But I don't think it's enough." Rachel wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. "It'll have to be. We don't have time to do more." Emily nodded, though her expression suggested she wasn't convinced. "Do you think they'll attack tonight?" "I don't know," Rachel admitted. "But we can't afford to wait and see. We need to be ready." As the two women worked, alarms suddenly blared through the colony. Red lights flashed along the walls, casting an ominous glow over everything. People froze where they stood, their faces turning toward the nearest screens. On the monitors, the alien fleet was visible, its ships now close enough to make out details. They were massive, far larger than anything Earth's fleet typically deployed. Strange symbols covered their hulls, glowing faintly against the blackness of space. Daniel Brooks appeared on the main communication channel, his voice calm but urgent. "Everyone, get to the shelters immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Panic erupted as colonists scrambled to follow his instructions. Parents grabbed their children, pulling them toward the nearest bunkers. Others helped carry supplies or guided the elderly and injured. Rachel and Emily exchanged a glance before rushing to join the chaos. Outside, the first shots came without warning. Bright beams of energy tore through the darkness, striking the outer edges of the colony. Explosions rocked the station, sending debris flying in every direction. The sound was deafening, a mix of metal screeching and air rushing out into the vacuum of space. Rachel ducked instinctively as a piece of shrapnel whizzed past her head, narrowly missing her. "Move," Emily shouted, grabbing Rachel's arm and pulling her forward. The two women ran through the corridors, dodging falling wreckage and helping others along the way. Smoke filled the air, making it hard to breathe. Alarms continued to wail, adding to the sense of urgency. Near the main hub, Daniel stood directing people toward the shelters. His face was streaked with dirt, but his voice remained steady. "This way," he called, pointing toward a reinforced door. "Keep moving." Rachel and Emily joined the crowd pouring into one of the bunkers. Inside, the space was cramped but secure. Families huddled together, clutching blankets and holding on to loved ones. Children cried softly, their faces buried in their parents' shoulders. Rachel scanned the room, counting heads to ensure everyone had made it inside. "They're targeting the power grid," Joseph announced as he entered the shelter. His voice was grim. "If they take that out, we lose life support." Rachel felt her heart sink. Without life support, the colony would become uninhabitable within hours. She turned to Emily. "We need to get back out there." Emily stared at her wide-eyed. "Are you crazy? It's too dangerous." "I know," Rachel replied, her tone firm. "But if we don't try, we're all dead anyway." Before Emily could argue further, Rachel slipped out of the shelter and into the chaos outside. The corridor was dimly lit, with sparks flying from damaged wiring. Smoke stung her eyes, and the acrid smell of burning metal filled her nostrils. She moved quickly, heading toward the central control room. Along the way, she encountered others trying to fight back. A group of colonists had taken up positions near the remaining turrets, firing desperately at the enemy ships. Their efforts seemed futile. The alien vessels barely registered the attacks, continuing their relentless assault. One man fell beside Rachel, clutching his side as blood seeped through his fingers. She hesitated for a moment, torn between helping him and pressing onward. "Go," he gasped, waving her away. "Save yourself." Reluctantly, Rachel obeyed, forcing herself to keep moving. When she reached the control room, she found Joseph already there, frantically working to reroute power to critical systems. "What's the status?" she asked, stepping over a pile of rubble. "We're losing." "Ground fast," he replied without looking up. "They've taken out half the generators. If we don't stabilize the grid soon, we're done for." Rachel rolled up her sleeves and joined him at the console. Together, they worked to isolate damaged sections of the power network, redirecting energy to areas still intact. It was slow, painstaking work, but every second counted. Meanwhile, in another part of the colony, Emily was doing what she could to help. She had stayed behind in the shelter, tending to the wounded and calming frightened children. Despite her fear, she refused to give in to despair. She knew Rachel was risking her life to protect them, and that thought gave her strength. Back in the control room, Rachel and Joseph finally managed to stabilize the power grid, at least temporarily. The lights flickered but held steady, and the hum of machinery resumed. For a brief moment, Rachel allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. Then, the communication system crackled to life. A voice came through, clear and commanding. "This is Captain William Hayes of Earth's Defense Fleet. Hold on, we're coming to help." Rachel's heart leapt at the sound of those words. Reinforcements were on the way. But even as relief washed over her, she knew the battle was far from over. The alien fleet showed no signs of slowing down, and Earth ships were still hours away. Outside, the attackers intensified their assault. Waves of energy weapons struck the colony, tearing through its defenses with terrifying efficiency. Fires broke out in multiple sections, spreading rapidly due to the lack of oxygen to suppress them. The air grew thick with smoke, making it harder to breathe. In the shelters, people clung to one another, praying for salvation. Daniel moved among them, offering words of encouragement and doing his best to maintain order. "Stay strong," he told them. "Help is coming." But not everyone shared his optimism. Some sat silently, their faces blank with resignation. Others wept openly, overwhelmed by the horror unfolding around them. Emily knelt beside a young girl who trembled uncontrollably, whispering soothing words and stroking her hair. Above the colony, the alien ships loomed like predators circling their prey. Their weapons fired relentlessly, showing no mercy. It was clear they intended to destroy New Haven completely, leaving nothing behind. Rachel and Joseph emerged from the control room, just as another explosion rocked the station. The force of the blast knocked them off their feet, sending them sprawling onto the floor. Rachel groaned as she pushed herself up, her ears ringing from the impact. She looked around, dazed, and saw Joseph lying motionless nearby. "No," she whispered, crawling toward him. She shook his shoulder gently, but he didn't respond. Tears blurred her vision as she realized he was gone. Forcing herself to stand, Rachel stumbled back toward the shelters. Every step felt heavier than the last, her body aching from exhaustion and grief. But she couldn't stop. Not yet. There were still people counting on her. When she reached the nearest bunker, she collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. Emily rushed to her side, concern etched on her face. "What happened?" she asked. "Joseph," Rachel began, her voice breaking. "He didn't make it." Emily wrapped an arm around her friend, holding her tightly. "I'm so sorry." They sat there together, mourning the loss of someone who had fought bravely until the end. Around them, the sounds of destruction continued, a constant reminder of the danger they faced. Hours passed, each one feeling like an eternity. The colony was in ruins, its once pristine halls now littered with debris and bodies. Fires burned unchecked, consuming whatever they touched. Yet despite the devastation, a small spark of hope remained. Earth's fleet was coming, and with it, a chance for survival. As Rachel gazed out at the stars through a cracked viewport, she thought about the people who had died defending New Haven. They hadn't given up, even when the odds were stacked against them. And neither would she. "We'll get through this," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else, somehow. Outside, the alien fleet prepared for another wave of attacks. But unknown to them, Earth ships were closing in, their engines roaring with determination. The battle was far from over, and when it ended, the survivors of New Haven would remember the cost of their freedom and the courage it took to fight for it. The alien fleet continued its relentless assault on New Haven, its ships moving with a cold efficiency that left no room for mercy. The colony was in ruins, its once thriving halls now reduced to twisted metal and shattered glass. Fires raged, unchecked, consuming what little remained of the infrastructure. Explosions echoed through the station, each one shaking the very foundation of the survivors' hope. Yet even as the destruction mounted, faint glimmers of resistance flickered in the darkness. Rachel Dawson sat hunched against the wall of the shelter, her body trembling from exhaustion. Her hands were blackened with soot, and her face bore streaks of dirt and tears. She had seen too much. Too many lives lost. Too much suffering. But she couldn't afford to give up. Not yet. Emily Carter knelt beside her, offering quiet words of support while tending to a young boy who had been injured during the chaos. His leg was wrapped in a makeshift bandage, but he winced every time he moved. "They're still out there," Rachel said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They won't stop until we're all gone." Emily nodded, though her expression was grim. Earth's fleet will be here soon, we just have to hold on. But holding on was easier said than done. Outside, the alien weapons tore through the colony's remaining defenses with ease. The air filtration systems were failing, and the oxygen levels inside the shelters were dropping dangerously low. People gasped for breath, their faces pale and strained. Children cried softly, their voices muffled by fear. It was only a matter of time before the situation became unbearable. Daniel Brooks stood near the entrance of the shelter, his eyes fixed on the monitors that still worked. The screens showed images of the alien fleet, its ships looming like predators, circling their prey. He clenched his fist tightly, his jaw set in determination. "We need to distract them," he muttered under his breath. "If we can buy Earth's fleet more time." Rachel overheard him and pushed herself to her feet. "What are you thinking?" she asked, her voice steady despite the exhaustion, weighing her down. Daniel turned to face her. "We've got one working turret left. If we can draw their attention away from the shelters, maybe we can give Earth's ships a chance to arrive." Rachel hesitated. The plan was risky, almost suicidal. Whoever manned the turret would be exposed to enemy fire with little chance of survival. But if it worked, it could save countless lives. "I'll do it," she said finally, her tone firm. "No," Daniel replied immediately. "It's too dangerous." "I'm the best shot we've got," Rachel argued, "and I know how to work the system. Let me do this." Before Daniel could protest further, Emily stepped forward. "I'll go with her," she said, her voice shaking but resolute. "Two people can handle it faster than one." Daniel looked at both women, his expression torn between gratitude and guilt. Finally, he nodded. "Be careful. We're counting on you." Outside, the air was thick with smoke and debris. Rachel and Emily moved quickly, staying low to avoid drawing attention. The colony's corridors were dark and treacherous, littered with fallen beams and shattered equipment. Every step felt heavier than the last, but they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that their actions might make the difference between life and death for everyone else. When they reached the turret, Rachel took a moment to inspect it. The weapon was old and battered, its surface scorched from earlier attacks, but it still worked, or at least it seemed to. She climbed into the control seat while Emily positioned herself nearby, ready to assist if needed. "Here goes nothing," Rachel muttered, flipping the activation switch. The turret hummed to life, its mechanisms whirring as it locked onto the nearest alien ship. Rachel steadied her breathing and squeezed the trigger. A burst of energy shot out, striking the target. With surprising precision, the alien ship shuddered under the impact, its shields flickering momentarily. For a brief second, Rachel allowed herself to feel a spark of triumph. Then reality hit her. The ship wasn't destroyed. It retaliated almost instantly, firing back, with devastating force. "Take cover!" Emily shouted, pulling Rachel down just as a blast struck the area around the turret. The impact sent shockwaves rippling through the structure, nearly knocking them off their feet. "We can't stop now," Rachel said, her voice strained. She climbed back into position and fired again, this time aiming for a different ship. The second attack was less accurate, but it served its purpose. It drew the aliens' attention. The enemy fleet shifted its focus, turning its weapons toward the source of the resistance. Explosions erupted around the turret, shaking the ground. Beneath Rachel and Emily's feet, they clung to the controls, refusing to abandon their post despite the mounting danger. Inside the shelter, Daniel watched the monitors intently. He saw the alien ships redirecting their firepower, their movements becoming more erratic as they chased after the turret. "It's working," he murmured, relief washing over him. "Keep going." But the cost of their success was high. The turret sustained heavy damage, its systems failing rapidly under the relentless barrage. Sparks flew from the console and warning lights flashed urgently. Rachel gritted her teeth, determined to keep firing for as long as possible. "Rachel!" Emily called out, her voice urgent. "The turret's about to overload." "I know," Rachel shouted back. She fired one last shot, then grabbed Emily's arm and pulled her away just as the turret exploded in a fiery blast. The force of the explosion threw them both backward, slamming them into the wall. Pain shot through Rachel's body, but she forced herself to stand, dragging Emily with her. "We have to get back to the shelter," she said, her voice hoarse. As they stumbled through the wreckage, the sound of engines filled the air. At first, Rachel thought it was another wave of alien ships, but then she saw them. Sleek, powerful vessels emerged from hyperspace, their hulls gleaming under the light of the distant sun. Earth's defense fleet had arrived. Captain William Hayes wasted no time issuing orders. "Target their command vessels first," he barked, his voice sharp and commanding. "We need to cripple their ability to coordinate." The battle that followed was fierce and chaotic. Earth's ships unleashed a barrage of advanced weaponry, their attacks cutting through the alien fleet with devastating precision. Laser beams sliced through enemy shields while missiles exploded against hulls, sending shards of metal spiraling into space. The aliens fought back fiercely, but they were unprepared for the sheer power of Earth's reinforcements. Among the pilots leading the charge was Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, a fearless fighter known for her skill and determination. Her squadron darted between the larger ships, picking off enemy fighters with surgical strikes. She maneuvered her craft with unmatched agility, dodging incoming fire while delivering blow after blow to the alien forces. "They're retreating," someone shouted as the remaining alien ships began to pull back, their formations breaking apart in disarray. Cheers erupted among the survivors of New Haven, though they were muted by exhaustion and grief. Rachel and Emily made it back to the shelter just as the final shots were fired. They collapsed onto the floor, their bodies aching from the ordeal, but their hearts filled with relief. "They did it," Emily whispered, tears streaming down her face. "They actually did it." Rachel nodded, too tired to speak. She looked around at the faces of the survivors, seeing both hope and sorrow etched into their expressions. So much had been lost, but they were alive, and that was something to hold on to. Daniel entered the shelter moments later, his face lined with fatigue but his eyes shining with gratitude. "Earth's fleet is securing the area," he announced. "The immediate threat is over." The news brought a collective sigh of relief, though no one celebrated. The cost of the victory was too great to ignore. Bodies lay scattered throughout the colony, and entire sections of the station were beyond repair. The scars of the battle would remain for a long time. As the survivors began to emerge from the shelters, they were greeted by the sight of Earth's ships hovering protectively. Nearby, rescue teams disembarked, carrying medical supplies and tools to assess the damage. Captain Hayes himself came aboard the colony, his presence a symbol of strength and reassurance. "You've been through hell," he said to Daniel as they met, in the main hub. "But you held on. That takes courage." Daniel nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "We couldn't have done it without your help." Hayes placed a hand on his shoulder. "You didn't give up. That's what matters." In the days that followed, the survivors of New Haven began the painstaking process of rebuilding. Earth's fleet remained in the system, providing aid and protection. Lieutenant Mitchell stayed behind to train the colonists in basic defense tactics, ensuring they would never be caught unprepared again. Rachel and Emily worked tirelessly alongside the others, repairing what they could and salvaging what remained. Though the colony was far from its former glory, the spirit of its people endured. They mourned their losses but refused to let despair define them. One evening, as Rachel stood on the newly repaired observation deck, she gazed out at the stars. They twinkled innocently, oblivious to the horrors that had unfolded beneath them. For the first time in days, she felt a sense of peace, a fragile, tentative peace, but peace nonetheless. "We'll get through this," she murmured, her voice soft but resolute. "No matter what." Behind her, Emily joined her at the window, her expression thoughtful. "Yes," she agreed, "we will." The battle was over, but the scars it left behind were deep. New Haven was a shadow of its former self, its halls still littered with debris and its walls bearing the marks of destruction. The air carried the faint smell of smoke, a constant reminder of what had happened. Yet amidst the ruins, life began to stir again. The survivors worked tirelessly, driven by a shared determination to rebuild their home. Rachel Dawson stood on the observation deck, her hands resting lightly on the eye railing as she gazed out at the stars. Her body ached from days of nonstop labor, but she refused to slow down. There was too much to do, too many people counting on her. Emily Carter joined her moments later, carrying a tray of food. She set it down on a nearby table and leaned against the railing beside Rachel. "You need to eat," Emily said gently, nodding toward the tray. "You can't keep going like this forever." Rachel glanced at the food but made no move to take it. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice flat. "There's no time to rest." Emily sighed, knowing better than to argue. Instead, she turned her attention to the view outside. The stars twinkled brightly, their light unchanging despite everything that had happened. Earth's ships still lingered in the distance, their presence a comforting reminder that help was near. "They're staying longer than expected," Emily remarked. "That's a good sign, isn't it?" Rachel nodded slowly. "Yeah, it is. But I can't shake the feeling that we're not out of danger yet." Her words hung in the air, heavy, with meaning. Though the alien fleet had retreated, no one knew if they would return, or when. The uncertainty weighed heavily on everyone, a constant undercurrent of tension beneath the surface of their daily lives. Down in the main hub, Daniel Brooks coordinated the rebuilding efforts with the assistance of Captain William Hayes and his crew. Supplies flowed steadily from Earth's ships, and teams of engineers worked around the clock to repair critical systems. Life support was restored, and the colony's power grid was slowly coming back online. But progress was slow, and the scale of the damage was overwhelming. Hayes stood beside Daniel, watching as workers hauled equipment into place. "This will take time," he said, his tone measured. "But you've got the resources you need. We'll stay as long as necessary." Daniel nodded, gratitude evident in his expression. "We owe you everything. Without your fleet, none of us would be here." Hayes shook his head. "You held your ground. That's what matters. We just gave you a fighting chance." Despite the captain's reassurance, Daniel couldn't ignore the guilt gnawing at him. Too many lives had been lost, too many sacrifices made. He vowed silently to honor those who had fallen by ensuring their deaths weren't in vain. Lieutenant. Sarah Mitchell spent her days training the colonists in basic defense tactics. She moved among them with quiet authority, teaching them how to operate weapons and fortify positions. Her lessons were practical and straightforward, designed to prepare them for any future threats. "This isn't about revenge," she told a group of volunteers during one session. "It's about survival. If they come back, you need to be ready." The colonists listened intently, absorbing every word. Many of them had never held a weapon before, let alone fired one. But necessity had forced them to adapt, and they approached the task with grim determination. Among the trainees was Joseph's younger brother, Alex. He had been close to Joseph, and his grief was still raw. Training gave him something to focus on, a way to channel his anger and sadness into action. He practiced tirelessly, determined to master the skills Mitchell taught. "You're doing well," Mitchell said to him after a particularly grueling drill. "Keep it up." Alex nodded, though his eyes remained somber. "I have to," he replied. "For my brother." As the days turned into weeks, the colony began to take shape again. Walls were patched, corridors cleared, and systems restored. Gardens were replanted, their green shoots poking through the soil, a symbol of renewal. Children ventured outside the shelters, their laughter echoing softly through the halls. It was a fragile kind of normalcy, but it was enough to give the survivors hope. Rachel and Emily played key roles in the recovery effort. Rachel focused on repairing machinery, while Emily helped tend to the injured and sick. Together, they formed a bond stronger than ever, forged in the fires of adversity. One evening, as the two women sat together in the engineering bay, Emily broached a topic that had been weighing on her mind. "Do you think the aliens will come back?" she asked, her voice hesitant. Rachel paused, considering the question. "Maybe," she admitted. But even if they do, we're stronger now. We know what's at stake. Emily nodded, though her expression remained troubled. It's hard to imagine living like this, always looking over our shoulder, waiting for the next attack. We don't have a choice, Rachel replied firmly. This is our home. We can't let fear drive us away. Her words resonated deeply with Emily, who realized that Rachel was right. Fear couldn't control them, not anymore. They had faced the worst and survived. That knowledge gave them strength. In the weeks that followed, Earth's fleet prepared to depart. Their mission had been accomplished, and there were other colonies in need of protection. Before leaving, Captain Hayes addressed the survivors one final time. You've shown incredible resilience, he said, his voice clear and strong. But remember, strength isn't just about fighting. It's about standing together, supporting each other, and refusing to give up. You've proven you have that strength. His words brought tears to some eyes, but they also inspired resolve. When the ships finally departed, the colony felt emptier, but not weaker. The survivors knew they could rely on themselves now. Life settled into a new rhythm. The colonists worked side by side, rebuilding not just their homes but their community. Memorials were erected for those who had died, their names etched into stone as a reminder of their sacrifice. Every day, someone stopped to pay their respects, leaving flowers or lighting candles. Rachel and Emily often visited the memorials together. They found comfort in the quiet moments, reflecting on all they had endured. One afternoon, as they stood before Joseph's name, Rachel spoke softly. He would be proud of us, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. Emily nodded. He'd tell us to keep going, to never stop fighting for what matters. That's exactly what we'll do, Rachel replied, her tone firm. For him and for everyone else. Months passed, and New Haven continued to heal. The scars of the battle remained, but so did the resilience of its people. They had learned painful lessons about vulnerability and strength, about loss and hope. And though the threat of another attack loomed over them, they refused to live in fear. One night, Rachel stood once more on the observation deck, gazing out at the stars. This time she wasn't alone. Emily joined her, along with Daniel, Alex, and others who had become family over the course of their ordeal. Together they watched as the universe stretched endlessly before them. We've come a long way, Daniel said, breaking the silence. But we've still got farther to go. Rachel smiled faintly. We'll get there, she said. Step by step. The others nodded, their faces reflecting a mix of sorrow and determination. They had lost much, but they had gained something, too. A deeper understanding of what it meant to fight for their home and for each other. As the stars twinkled above, Rachel felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but she knew they would face it together. Whatever challenges lay in store, the people of New Haven were ready. They had proven their strength, and they would prove it again. And should the aliens ever return, they would find that the colony was no longer defenseless. The rebuilding of New Haven continued, but the pace was slower than anyone had hoped. Supplies from Earth's fleet were dwindling, and the colony's resources were stretched thin. The survivors worked tirelessly, but fatigue began to take its toll. Rachel Dawson woke each morning with a heavy feeling in her chest, knowing there was still so much to do. Yet she pushed herself forward, driven by the memory of those who hadn't survived. Emily Carter stayed close to Rachel, offering support whenever she could. Together they tackled one task after another, their partnership becoming a cornerstone of the colony's recovery. Rachel focused on repairing machinery, while Emily helped tend to the injured and organize food distribution. Their days were long, often stretching late into the night, but neither complained. They knew that every small step brought them closer to stability. Daniel Brooks remained at the center of it all, coordinating efforts and ensuring that everyone had what they needed. His leadership had been tested during the battle, and he had emerged stronger for it. Still, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him. He often found himself staring at the stars, wondering if the alien fleet would return, and whether They would be ready. One day, a new challenge arose. The hydroponic gardens, which provided most of the colony's food, began to fail. Plants wilted, their leaves turning yellow and brittle. Without fresh produce, the colony risked starvation. Panic spread quickly among the settlers, and Daniel called an emergency meeting to address the issue. "We need to figure out why this is happening," he said, his voice calm but firm. "If we don't fix it soon, we won't survive." Rachel and Emily volunteered to investigate. They spent hours examining the irrigation systems, soil samples, and nutrient solutions. Finally, Emily discovered the problem. A critical component in the filtration system had malfunctioned, contaminating the water supply. "We can replace it," Rachel said, inspecting the damaged part. "But we'll need materials we don't have." Daniel nodded. "We'll send a message to Earth. They'll send what we need." But sending a message wasn't as simple as it sounded. The colony's communication array had been damaged during the attack, and repairs were ongoing. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, who had stayed behind to assist with defense training, offered to help restore the system. She worked alongside Rachel and Emily, her technical expertise proving invaluable. For days, the three women labored over the array, piecing together broken components and rerouting power lines. It was grueling work, but they refused to give up. When the system finally came back online, the entire colony gathered to watch as the message was sent. "Help is coming," Daniel announced afterward. "Earth knows our situation. They'll send supplies." Relief swept through the crowd, though it was tempered by the knowledge that it would take time for the shipment to arrive. In the meantime, the colonists rationed their remaining food, sharing what little they had. Tensions ran high, but no one gave in to despair. They had faced worse, and they would endure this too. While waiting for Earth's response, the colony turned its attention to fortifying its defenses. Lieutenant Mitchell led daily drills, teaching the settlers how to use weapons and coordinate attacks. Alex, Joseph's younger brother, proved to be a natural leader, rallying others to join him in practice sessions. His determination inspired those around him, and soon the entire colony was involved in preparing for the possibility of another attack. Rachel joined the drills reluctantly, preferring to focus on engineering tasks. But Emily encouraged her to participate, reminding her that survival depended on everyone doing their part. At first, Rachel struggled with the unfamiliar skills, but she quickly improved under Mitchell's guidance. "You're getting better," Mitchell told her one afternoon after a particularly intense session. "Keep it up." Rachel nodded, though her expression remained serious. "I'm doing this for them," she said, gesturing toward the other settlers. "Not for me." Mitchell understood. She had seen the same resolve in countless soldiers throughout her career. "That's the right mindset," she replied. "It's not about you, it's about protecting the people you care about." As weeks passed, the colony grew stronger. The settlers worked together seamlessly, their bonds forged in shared hardship. Gardens were replanted using purified water, and crops began to thrive once more. Food shortages eased and spirits lifted. Even the children seemed happier, playing games and laughing as they explored the newly repaired corridors. But beneath the surface, unease lingered. Scans of the surrounding space revealed no sign of the alien fleet, but that only deepened the mystery. Why had they attacked? What did they want? And where had they gone? Rachel often thought about these questions as she worked. She couldn't shake the feeling that the aliens hadn't given up, that they were simply biding their time. Her concerns weren't unfounded. One evening, while monitoring the external sensors, she noticed something unusual: faint energy readings near the edge of the system. She immediately alerted Daniel, who convened a meeting to discuss the findings. "It could be nothing," he said, addressing the group. "But we can't afford to ignore it." Lieutenant Mitchell agreed. "We should increase patrols and keep a close eye on the readings. If it's them, we need to be ready." The colony sprang into action, implementing heightened security measures. Volunteers manned the observation decks around the clock, scanning for any signs of movement. Turrets were recalibrated, and weapons were distributed to key locations. Everyone prepared for the worst, even as they hoped for the best. Days turned into weeks and the energy readings remained unchanged. Some began to wonder if they had overreacted, but Rachel refused to let her guard down. She spent hours poring over data, searching for patterns or anomalies. Her persistence paid off when she discovered a subtle shift in the readings, a sign that whatever was out there was moving closer. "We need to act now," she told Daniel urgently. "They're coming." Daniel wasted no time issuing orders. The colony went into lockdown with everyone retreating to the shelters. Turrets were activated and defensive positions were fortified. Lieutenant Mitchell coordinated the response, ensuring that every settler knew their role. When the alien ships finally appeared, they were larger and more numerous than before. Their sleek forms glided silently through space, exuding an aura of menace. For a moment it seemed as though history was about to repeat itself, but this time the colony was ready. As the aliens opened fire, the settlers responded with precision and coordination. Turrets unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, targeting the enemy ship's weak points. Volunteers stationed at strategic locations fired handheld weapons, picking off smaller vessels. The battle was fierce, but the settlers held their ground. Lieutenant Mitchell led a daring counterattack, piloting a patrol ship directly into the heart of the alien formation. Her maneuvers were bold and unpredictable, forcing the enemy to divert their attention. Explosions lit up the darkness as ship after ship was disabled or destroyed. Inside the shelters, Rachel and Emily monitored the battle from the safety of the control room. Their hearts raced as they watched the screens, praying for victory. Finally, after what felt like hours, the tide turned. The alien fleet began to retreat, its remaining ships fleeing into deep space. Cheers erupted throughout the colony as the threat diminished. People hugged one another, tears streaming down their faces. They had done it. They had fought back and won. In the aftermath, the survivors gathered to assess the damage. Though the colony had suffered losses, the overall destruction was far less severe than before. Repairs were already underway, and morale was higher than ever. Lieutenant Mitchell addressed the settlers, her voice filled with pride. "You've proven yourselves," she said. "You stood your ground and protected your home. That's something to be proud of." Her words resonated deeply with everyone. They had faced unimaginable challenges and emerged stronger for it. The scars of the battle would remain, but so would the lessons they had learned. As Rachel stood beside Emily, gazing out at the stars, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. The road ahead would still be difficult, but she knew they could handle whatever came their way. They had built something worth fighting for, a community rooted in resilience, courage, and hope. And should the aliens ever return, they would find that the people of New Haven were no longer defenseless. They were fighters, united by a shared purpose and determined to protect the world they had rebuilt.